right, here we go, diving into another episode of the Fighting for Fatherhood podcast. And today I'm going to be explaining how getting sick can actually correlate to your reflection and priorities. I ended up coming down with something and it put me out to where I completely lost my voice for about 4 days. And then the following 3 to 4 days after that, I was totally just dog sick and didn't feel myself at all. And so I actually went about a week without doing any podcast episodes and was able to spend some time. And what ends up happening is when you're sick, you have this excuse and this barrier that you can just easily say you don't want to do certain things, right? Like you can work a little bit less, you can get off of work if you need to, you can play up or play down how sick you are, depending on what the things are. Like if you got a expensive concert ticket that you got, chances are that sickness isn't going to be that big of a deal. But if you've got a dead week at work, you got some spare time and resting sounds good, that sickness might feel like it's worse than it actually is, right? And so we have this excuse, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. We kind of let our bodies kind of dictate that. But what you're able to do when you use these excuses is really figure out where your priorities are, and that's through your reflection time. Now, I truly believe that we need breaks at times, especially as fathers and husbands, in order to take that time and make sure that we're completely aligned and right when it comes to things. And you're able to take this time and say, okay, what am I doing while I'm sick and I'm avoiding things? What am I avoiding? And of those things that I'm avoiding, what do I actually care about that I'm avoiding or missing? And so for me, it was not being able to record this podcast for a couple of days. It actually really bugged me that I wasn't able to get in here and do this, because this is something that I really care about doing. And so I noticed how much of a priority it was when I took the time to reflect while I'm being sick. Now, if you just sit in bed and scroll through Facebook for 7 hours a day and then go to bed, you're just wasting time. But being sick is actually an incredible time for you to be able to wind down a little bit, spend some time really diving into some stuff, getting into some things that can actually help you grow and develop, and then you can spend some time reflecting on it. And so I was able to identify some things like getting to be inside with the kids a little bit more and watching them play around. I just realized how much I like that hour to 2 hours before we start getting ready for bedtime, where I get to actually watch my kids just kind of be kids. Something that I've missed over the years a lot of is that wind down time, and that time where dad's just kind of around. And sure, I was sick and I couldn't really do much and I didn't really have a lot of energy to play with them, which is fine. I just got to be there, and they knew that I was there. They knew that I was present, which was really cool. And so you notice a lot of people say how work is the one thing that they just don't care for as much because you don't want to go to your job all the time. But really, if you dive down into what your work unlocks for you and gives you the capabilities to do for your family and kids, it's actually pretty important. And it actually shows in your priorities when you get back to work how much you actually miss working. And so for me, I actually took some half days. I had too much responsibility while I was sick and I had to be at work every day. But even taking those half days, when I was taking the full days, it just made me realize how much I appreciate being able to work and provide for my family. So when you're sick and you got those moments and you got those times where you really just kind of got to figure yourself out, it's really good to dive in and spend some time in reflection and figure out where your priorities are. If you don't take some time to audit your priorities a couple times in life, before you know it, they're going to be completely out of whack. You got to take the time to actually pay attention to the things that you're paying attention to. There's a guy that I listen to called Taylor Welch, and he, in his podcast, one of his things that I love listening to him say is you got to think about what you're thinking about. And the only way that you can do that is when you actually look at what you're paying attention to, you actually take the time to think. And if all you're doing whenever you have a free moment is brain numbing yourself, you're not actually thinking about anything, you're not identifying your priorities. So auditing your priorities by taking the time to reflect is the only way that you're going to make sure you keep your family as a priority if they actually are your priority. And if they're not, you need to figure out what it's going to take to get your family as your number one priority, because your family at the end of the day should always be your number one priority. Your job is to take care of that family. That's what you chose to do when you chose to be a husband, and that's what you chose to do when you chose to be a father. And whether or not that came by a surprise or not, you are a father and you are a husband, and you have a responsibility to those people to be there and take care of them. And if your priorities are inside of Facebook or inside of Instagram or inside of scrolling or inside of other relationships or inside of too much time with your buddies, if you're getting sucked into relationships with other women through work or whatever it is, or chatting, you need to get those priorities checked and aligned. And the only way that you're going to do that is by spending some time auditing them and reflecting 99% of the time without your phone. You cannot audit your priorities with your cell phone because of how much of a distraction it is, in my opinion. Other people might disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think when you take the time to put your cell phone down and actually audit yourself, that's when you're going to figure out A, where your priorities currently are, and B, where you need realignment in those priorities. So for me, being sick for about a week was a really good time for me to be able to do that. And now I was actually able to take most of this earlier part of the week and actually dive into how much my family's a priority. And I'm trying to build into my schedule to make sure that I'm keeping them as the forefront every single day of every single week, because they're the ones that I care about. So figure out what it is for you, figure out what you need to be spending time on and how you're going to audit your priorities. And if you got to get sick to do it, get sick to do it. God's going to help with that. Believe me, he knows when you're falling. And if you can find a way to do it without it, then obviously don't get sick and find a way to do it without. But for me, it took getting sick for me to look back and pay attention a little bit. So figure out what it is for you, dive into it, and let's keep growing and being better fathers.